Before Resident Evil Village, there was Resident Evil, well, Village. Featuring our boy Leon, who's gone from a green tyrant-slaying machine to a more seasoned operative specializing in the Doomslayer school of complete enemy annihilation. Leaning more heavily into the action side of Resident Evil's explorative puzzle or horror notes, Resident Evil 4 goes above and beyond to throw non-stop thrills at the player from start to finish. While the creativeness and diversity of the evolving gameplay sequences deserves heaps of praise, today I'll be featuring my signature topic, the bosses. I've even decided to include a handful of mini-bosses or unique enemies notable for their design. Here's to kicking off Resident Evil Week with boss rankings on 7 and 8 soon to follow. Without further ado, let's get started with the Resident Evil 4 bosses ranked from worst to best. Number 11, Salazar. Now, before you get your Napoleonic knickers in a twist, you have to understand I rank things based on my own perspective. The tremendous buildup of finally dueling this pompous dwarf, visual design that clearly guides the player on mechanics, an imposing stature and arena well suited to evading it. On paper, this fight had the potential to be among the game's best. And yet, I'll never know what could have been, because what there was a single sharpshooter shot to the eye, leaving Salazar exposed to become minced midget meat at the behest of a single RPG. To state it plainly, for all the climactic buildup, the fight was over in less than seconds in 2 shots. Boom! I knew the RPG was supposed to inflict the big deeps, but I didn't expect it to effectively insta-kill a boss built up for half of the game's runtime. You get one for free not too long before this, not to mention you can buy one from the merchant at any time for 3,000 cash, which is notable since he drops 50,000 upon defeat, enough to replace your rocket and then some. Whatever hope he had of being ranked seriously blew to smithereens along with my dashed expectations, a disappointment that sadly earns him bottom dishonors. Number 10, Saddler. If upping the grotesque dial to the limits of an elderly man vomiting a zombified half-spider is your aesthetic, then boy have you come to the right place. He shares a similar weak point to his half-pint bottom-dwelling compadre. In another similarity, he hides this true weakness through shooting other vulnerable eyes located around his body. They open and shut at intervals, and his movement at least makes them a wee bit challenging to hit. Thanks to the shotgun's wide codal range though, it's pretty inconsequential. All it takes is one blast and he reveals his weak point, one that can only withstand a few shots from high-tier endgame weapons before he's dead. It at least took more than one, so I got to see his charges, swipes, and tentacle whips that added a modicum of tension in this final bout. Still, I couldn't help but feel him mechanically lacking in comparison to his low difficulty ceiling. I wish they had made it so that once you did a percentage of damage, you dismembered a limb, thereby losing an eye, but creating a more diverse and desperate moveset from him as he degrades. This could force you to be inventive with the arena design in your toolkit when the hind legs are all that remains. Sadly, the potential for a progressive and inventive fight is left untapped, leaving a mild note to end a fantastic game on. Number 9, Leatherface. I half debated excluding this chainsaw-toting brute as a contestant, but he's such an iconic part of the game I felt like I had to. Resident Evil 4 is full of oh shit moments when you're suddenly swarmed by danger. The first of these is Leatherface and his band of vivacious villagers. You're left with limited space to maneuver through the hordes while finding a way to lure Leatherface away long enough to escape, or claim victory through his defeat. This wild goose chase or toe-to-toe tango is compelling for a moment, but that's all it is. In the grand scheme of the game, it isn't terribly notable, especially when identical enemies appear regularly in the later half of the game as glorified bullet sponges. I enjoy his early moment in the sun, but it's hardly enough to compare to the rising ranks. Number 8, Krauser. In a series full of chaotic chase sequences, it's hard to live up to the competition. Krauser has the unique wrinkle of human ingenuity on his side, something I praise the fight for taking advantage of, mostly. He'll verbally taunt you, strategically track and attack you, and use supporting tools to get the upper hand like a flashbang. There's variety in being trapped and forced to juke in limited space, force fights to proceed, and even scripted ambushes. The thick tension these strengths highlight grows and grows until it peaks in a final battle. This is where Krauser falls flat. Rather than amplifying the craftiness he uses in his pursuits to his fighting style, he turns into yet another viral bullet sponge. You're given a 3-minute timer to win an escape, so you have to throw caution to the wind in a race to win. This makes his ability to dart circles around you while blocking more frustrating than fun. I will admit that pulling off a clutch magnum headshot between his shifty moves is satisfying, but he throws you into so many QTE dodge prompts you won't often get a chance to even try. These prompts are a get-out-of-jail-free card that makes you feel invincible outside of the ticking clock. I eventually won through sheer will and reckless fire, but the repetitive 2 minutes of quick-time dodges and calculated shots left me thoroughly whelmed. Why not make use of his special skills like before? Use more of the espionage tactics to expand his mechanics. Make greater use of the full arena, or better yet, make the full chase an actual part of his overall health bar instead of a brutally simple end. It's solid overall, but the missed potential is too hard to ignore. Number 7, the right hand. Trading in the open taunts of Krauser for a more subtle approach, the right hand opts for intense cinematics and jump scares to put stress on the player. These work well to induce panic throughout a moderately lengthy run through underground corridors laden with liquid nitrogen canisters to catch your eye. Important to note, since the run of QTE dodges ends with you cornered in a room for 4 minutes. Sadly, I didn't find the actual fighting to be the most intuitive. You sometimes get a dodge prompt, but other times you get squat and are skewered for it. Shaky dodging mechanics aside, the actual KO is fairly simple. Use one of the aforementioned canisters to easily freeze the beast, then shatter it into pieces with a one-shot explosion. The many canisters suggest a drawn-out battle of frozen attrition with lesser weapons, but the game hands you a free RPG right before this, so naturally I used it. If that long chase had occurred mixed in with consistent evasion mechanics, this could have risen much higher. As it stands, the right hand lands just below the average. Number 6, Regenerator. These are the quintessential zombie mobs of the game on steroids. The signature slow movement, the quiet, ominous groans as they close in, and a notable weak point to force precision under pressure. In a clever contrast to a game that asks you to use limbs to stun and debilitate foes, Regenerators will forever regenerate extremities and damage done to them. Instead, you must use infrared vision on a scoped rifle that forces you to stay stationary to hit tiny parasites. Once they're all sniped, the Regenerator explodes in defeat. Asking you to stand still and scope in while that threat closes in is terrifying. Where the Regenerator loses value is how often it's encountered in arenas that give you oodles of space. The more time you have to set up shop, the less engaging these thrilling encounters are. They make an attempt to remedy this later with upgrade versions boasting more weak points, even one on their back, but you just blow the leg and pop it off. The concept on paper works as a beautiful rough draft. With some refinement, these enemies could have acted as mini Mr. X's. As they stand, they define the middle of the pack in a commendable manner. Number 5, Wolverine. This claw-clad Chad is a great example of using the arena and a simple mechanic to distinguish an entire encounter. He's blind, basing all his pursuit off of sound. It's a clever deviation from enemies that are homing in on you guaranteed, albeit slowly. Wolverine gains speed, but loses easy tracking. This alters the pressure put on the player in a significant way from the norm. Often the game presses you to run, juke, and make use of environmental blockades to put spacing between you and your foes as fast as possible. In contrast, the Wolverine demands movement to be moderated and kept to a minimum. This is matched brilliantly with a weak spot on his back, forcing you to use calculated sound and dodges to lure him into a vulnerable position. This can be done through your own toolkit or the environment with bells. I love that the bells get destroyed after use though, so you can't easily abuse them. Wolverine is a lesson in simplicity done right. Execution is paramount for an enjoyable fight, even if it is a bit plain compared to his peers. Number 4, El Gigante. This isn't my first rodeo. A giant door rampant with bangs and screams of an imposing threat next to a wide barren arena screams boss battle. What I didn't expect was that it would be the Chained Ogre's zombified cousin in a tank-controlled game featuring no proper dodge. That said, with proper use of sprint and the camera shift, it felt surprisingly smooth to move around his lengthy wind-ups. My experience with juking Mr. X in Resident Evil 2 Remake definitely came in handy here. A dog you saved coming back to return the favor is a cool touch, even if I felt guilty having the injured pup draw the ire of the ogre. The distraction affords you time to restock your arsenal if you're running low, and ample opportunity to light him up. His damage output is also fair for the early game. It's balanced well, assuming the player understandably has trouble dodging flawlessly. I appreciated the contrast to many chase sequences in forcing you to square up against a titanic foe. You even get to face off against double the trouble later, with a zipline allowing you to dropkick one into hell to even the odds, which was pretty awesome. Really, the fight is only lacking in creativity, as it's mostly a large bullet sponge, especially in the later double fight. The drawn-out nature can make the limitations of your evasion options become a source of frustration rather than fun if you aren't a juke master. Still, the execution is solid, with enough variety from his peers to stand tall in the top 5. Number 3, Bernardo Mendez. Mendez is more spectacle than menace. It's imposing having a dude whose hobby is tossing you around like a ragdoll pretzel the exit, locking you in his Thunderdome. Unfortunately, Leon's action movie antics just make things worse and very, very grotesque. A nice marriage of quick-time dodges and environmental spacing, the fight makes full use of the closed-in barn. You'll notice exploding barrels to utilize and an upper deck to give you a bird's-eye view at the cost of eventually getting yoinked to the ground if you overstay your welcome. As you run back and forth in your limited space, he eventually becomes a monkey bar maniac to try to get the drop on you. The quick-time dodges become more rapid to layer the pressure through jump scares. In return, you can knock him off the rafters for a hefty punish. I would have loved to see them go even further with environmental damage, forcing you to slowly collapse the barn on him, with the shifting arena changing phases of the fight, but for the most part they pulled this off in great fashion. Enough style to give Mendez the number 3 nod. Number 2, Del Lago. Leon's affinity for giant aquatic monstrosities is excessive. Similar to this overly gluttonous Zombodile. I was dying for a boss battle after slaughtering hordes of disgruntled cultists in the opening hours. My reward was an incredibly unique action sequence baked into a boss fight. At first, I wasn't sure how much boat control you needed outside of the spear slamming minigame, but taking a truck-sized log to the face woke me up to that real quick. Once you get used to the movement, dodging the logs and snapping charges is smooth as butter. Nicely keeping you on your toes, the boat will periodically stop as he silently lurks, only to barrel towards you full steam. Either make the shot or become Lago lunch. If you are knocked overboard, you have to button mash to reach safety. And the final bit is a quick time mashathon that made it abundantly clear the popular QTEs of this era would be readily present in Resident Evil 4. While this is far and away one of the simplest bosses on the list, its spectacle is second to none. The only thing I really missed was the opportunity to use my traditional toolkit to claim victory, a chance well afforded by the number 1 boss in Resident Evil 4, U3. Elements of Resident Evil 4 boss design revolve around building tension through forced encounters in small spaces, heart-pumping chases, and tanky brutes that demand precision and ingenuity from the player to survive. U3 offers all of this, starting with brief drive-by encounters to quick-time jump scares and time races to a shrinking finish line. When the overbloated menace does square up, he rarely overstays his welcome. Mixing in puzzle elements with switches and buttons you need to identify to escape while under fire is a brilliant way of amplifying the thrill of this battle, and maintaining the puzzle spirit of the series. Once you do finally face off, you're afforded a rock to ring around the Rosie, gates to put space between you with clever timing, explosive barrels to lessen the burden on your armory, all the while his chase becomes more imposing with a second, more aggressive phase. From what I've read, it's a challenge to dodge, but I wouldn't know since I made short work of him between barrels, the Magnum, and another RPG. What U3 gets right over his contemporaries I easily exploded is an expertly crafted lead-in, creating a crescendo that allows his short-lived final romp to feel like a perfect high note, an overall balanced tune that has me singing its praises all the way to the top. But of course, that's just my opinion. What did you think of Resident Evil 4 and its bosses? Let us know in the comments below. Personally, the timeless quality blew me away and has me more excited than ever to see what modern Resident Evil has to offer. Be sure to subscribe for the upcoming Resident Evil 7 and 8 rankings and all the other content I have in store. Until then, I want to thank you for watching today, much love to you, and I'll see you in the next video.